at least in polyamory, it's not all about sex. It's actually more about the relationships that you build. If you're, say, another flavor of non-monogamy, like swingers, it's more about sex and less about the relationship, because some people don't have a problem with the sex aspect, but they have a problem with people getting close.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly break from the interview format and just interject a little biology in here.
People are like, well, if I allow somebody else to come into the relationship, I'm going to lose that person. Well, first off, you can't possess a person. They're there willingly. And if they're not, well, you don't have a sound relationship.
Sometimes the woman eats the male.
Yeah,
so
don't be a Black Widow male.
Yeah, so
like, we're not hunter-gatherers. So the things that worked millennia ago no longer apply. We can kind of do what we want.
Yeah, the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, yet when it comes to practicing that, very few do.
In my experience, I've become really good friends with partners. And so it really troubles me to see there be any kind of conflict. Like, I want to fix it because that's my relationship too.
People who are accustomed to monogamous relationships would really understand, is the primary, secondary, like, is there a tertiary? Like, how far down does it go? And does that create this, I don't know, a feeling of a hierarchy or a class system where someone feels like more or less important than the other?
I use the analogy of kids. If you have one kid, that's your one kid and that's your favorite kid. But then if you have two, do you like the second kid more than the first? Or do you like the first more than the second? Or do you love them both equally? What if you have a third kid? Okay, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Erik Rosenbladt, and if you really like the show, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like and share this video. Maybe subscribe to the channel. That would be awesome.
Who is this girl? Oh, I'm Casey Rochford, and sorry, excuse me, it's Valentine's Day today, and I was just consulting the little black book to see how many Valentines I had to buy. The answer is 0. This is a to-do list. But if you stick around to the end of our show, and you can make it through all my corny jokes, we've got music, and you can pick it up at patreon.com/KSMVidcast. So, being Valentine's Day, how many people are in your little black book, or is it more of a big book at this point?
Well, it's a little bit expansive, but a couple people. Yeah. So
for viewers that may not be aware, you are part of a lifestyle group. I don't know how you would best describe it. Polyamory.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, what little I understand of it, it's actually not super popular, but here in Washington State, it's actually like probably the most popular, at least in this country, as far as that lifestyle goes. Is that correct?
I'd say it's definitely a popular thing in this area, which is fortunate for me. So I guess maybe I should explain what polyamory is. In fact, I should probably start with kind of the core of this, because polyamory is one of many different kinds of relationship lifestyles in this sort of sphere, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
The core of it is ethical non-monogamy. And so you have your monogamous people who have one partner, presumably for life or whatever. And then you have non-monogamous people who have more than one partner. It varies. So, you know, you have people that like, I guess it's kind of personal. People kind of tend to think of something as fitting into a particular category or another. And there are kind of loose categories, but it varies from person to person and relationship to relationship. And even within non-monogamy, you can have a facet of a relationship that is one way and another side, like a partner, a different partner that you have a different relationship with. Um, you know, you can have somebody who's your lifetime partner, a primary as they call it, and then another partner that's just a play partner, somebody that you have sex with or whatever. Or maybe you just go hang out and go see movies or something like that. It
Uh-huh.
just depends. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good, you know, like groundwork. So,
Yeah. Oh, and I should probably explain my particular flavor, I guess, if
uh-huh.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just kind of like where I fall, because I'm not like I. So polyamory in general, pretty much centers around relationships and romantic relationships, sometimes friendships. Um, but it's not necessarily focused on sex or anything like that. It's loving relationships or emotional connection and things like that.
Mhm.
And so there's multiple partners, and lots of times in my particular case, I I actually enjoy meeting partners and hanging out and doing stuff and all that interconnection. So that's my particular flavor of that.
Okay. So, being that there are a lot of flavors, I don't know that this would really be applicable, but I was just kind of wondering, are there, I don't know, like universal ground rules to these types of relationships? You
Um,
mentioned the ethical portion, so I imagine there's probably kind of a certain expected behavior, right?
Yeah, and so as far as ethics in relationships go, in non-monogamy, um, there's kind of a general idea of what things should be, but the key thing is communication and openness. Like you lay down your ground rules and you talk about things and stuff like that. So across the board, it's different from group to group and partner to partner. So some people are very closed, like you have very explicit rules and defined boundaries and things like that. And then other relationships, it's kind of like anything goes as long as you don't do anything completely awful. So
Huh.
it's defined individually between the partners.
So theoretically, could you even have like a sort of, I don't know, like monogamy within the polyamory where, I don't know, like you mentioned primary. I'm thinking that's probably like who you live, you know, cohabitate with, and
Hmm.
you know, maybe you have kids together or something. You know,
Yeah.
whoever you spend the lion's share of your time with or something. Um, Maybe they're like, well, yeah, you can go to the movies, but I don't want you to have sex with anyone, or you know, like I don't like that particular person. I don't want you hanging out with them. Is there any kind of like restrictive? Um, I don't want to say restrictive necessarily, but like, are there any like no nos or taboos that can be laid in this groundwork and still be considered um, overall polyamory?
Yeah. Because again, it's kind of between the individuals to decide what those things are. So some people tend to be a little bit more restrictive than others. What you mentioned before about kind of a closed system, like I believe they call it a polycule. Um, so you can have more than one partner, but you're not completely open. So it's like, okay, you have your, like, you and your married partner, right? And then maybe another person or two other people or something that are part of this little closed system, and nobody goes outside of it. Um,
Hmm.
so that exists as well. It is it's kind of a personal thing that depends
Yeah.
on the individuals, and
Huh.
some people, the I mean, the primary thing is very prevalent, because in a lot of cases, married people that open up and um, decide to allow other partners in. So obviously, yeah, like you said, if you have kids and you have a household and all this stuff, like you're paying off a mortgage and stuff, yeah, you're the those partners are the primary, and in general, people respect that. I do. I think that's expected, that you respect the wishes of the other people
Yeah.
in the
I,
system.
I could see like uh, clear benefits and advantages to that, because if you're worried about introducing STDs into your circle, at least like closing that circle at some point would kind of protect against that a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, and that is kind of a concern that a lot of people address through
Yeah.
that process. That it's a very selective
So a
group of
polycule
people.
would kind of be like a relationship commune where, or a compound where, like there's a certain number of, like units, and
Yeah,
they just kind of do their own thing. And then, huh,
yeah, exactly.
okay. So that's interesting. So it is obviously not all about sex, but is that ever like a point of contention? Is jealousy ever crop up?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So yeah, at least in polyamory, it's not all about sex. It's actually more about the relationships that you build.
Hmm.
If you're, say, another flavor of non-monogamy, like swingers, it's more about sex and less about the relationship, because some people don't have a problem with the sex aspect, but they have a problem with people getting close. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah.
But like you said, or you were asking, does jealousy ever become a thing? Yeah, it does, because that is kind of a human thing. And it's something you constantly have to battle with. Like, um, especially growing up in the culture that we have, where monogamy is kind of the norm, and it's kind of drilled into your head. um, I think people sort of have that sort of reaction automatically, thinking that somebody else coming into the system is going to somehow threaten the relationship you have. And so you're always kind of dealing with that. And I have a lot of points about that actually too, because I think, well, people are like, well, if I allow somebody else to come into the relationship, I'm going to lose that person. Well, first off, you can't possess a person. They're there willingly. And if they're not, well, you don't have a sound relationship. And if you have a sound relationship, you have nothing to worry about, because that person is always going to come back. They will always be there. You will always still have that connection. It's the same thing with like friendships.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
And
you can
like,
have a number of friends, and just because like you and I hang out doesn't mean that like some other friend, I'm never going to hang out with them again. I'm like, oh well, you suck now because Casey's awesome. Like,
yeah.
that doesn't happen.
No, I can see arguments for both sides. Obviously, if I'm just going to use sex as an example here. If you're in a relationship and then you go have sex with another partner, that's not going to like make you less attracted to your primary partner.
Mhm.
But um, you could make the argument that you could start building a greater attraction toward them, and want to shift your primary focus. And in that way, they would kind of lose that connection with you. Um, but
Yeah.
But I mean, if that happens, it happens, and like you said, you don't really possess people. So if that's something that happens naturally, there's really nothing you can do about it, and
Yeah, yeah,
you want everyone to be as happy as they can be, right? So
exactly. Like it's not the end of the world
it's
if
complicated.
a partner goes off somewhere else, like that. They're free to do that.
Hmm.
Sometimes another partner in the relationship actually builds a stronger bond between the previous partners. Like there's something about it that does actually, it's a like a synergistic effect. um, it's like a love amplifier, I guess, in some cases, depending on how you do things.
Yeah.
um,
So
so it's not necessarily a negative, is it? Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, you were going to ask
yeah,
something.
I just wanted to briefly break from the interview format and just interject a little biology in here. Um, there's I've heard arguments going both ways about human nature. And I guess some of this is sociology too, but um, and most animals, uh, humans being included in the animal kingdom, um,
Mhm.
do practice a form of polyamory, or at least non-monogamy, let's say.
Yeah.
uh, and uh, a lot of times it is like a patriarchal focused benefits system.
Mhm.
I think in a lot of animal kingdoms, sometimes the woman eats the male, but
Yeah,
so
don't be a Black Widow
yeah,
male.
so we as humans don't have it all that bad. So,
Yeah.
but that's most animals. But as far as human evolution goes, by the time Homo sapiens came onto the scene, the nuclear family unit, there's a lot of evidence showing that was for good evolutionary reasons, kind of a tight knit, well established thing for survival needs. And I mean, other animals do this too, like lions, and certain birds mate for life and stuff like that. So it's not unknown to have monogamy. It's not like you can't say monogamy is the true, a natural state of things, because it's just everyone's a little different.
True. Yeah.
And so I don't think it's necessarily like wired into our brains to fool around. I've seen people say that, like on Facebook and stuff. They're like men are wired to cheat, and if they just had Jesus or whatever. Um,
But I actually have a book recommendation to kind of, uh, I guess, clear the air on that particular angle.
hmm,
So yeah, I'll throw that in later.
all right.
But yeah, I don't think that monogamy is kind of artificial, in my view. Um, but oh man, I was about to go down a rabbit hole there. Um, but
What do
yeah,
you mean by official?
huh?
What do you mean by official?
What's that?
You said monogamy is our official?
Oh, no, I don't. We're not like inherently monogamous. That's what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think biologically speaking, I think that non-monogamy is fairly normal. And I I
Well,
think the
yeah,
the past aspect of things doesn't necessarily apply to the current world as we know it. Like, we're not hunter gatherers, so the things that worked millennia ago no longer apply. We can kind of do what we want.
yeah.
And
Like, we're not in danger of going extinct from lack of not not having enough humans to fight off predators. We're way beyond that. So
yeah,
there isn't really a need to go spreading the seed about. But yeah,
yeah,
I get what you're saying. It's like a, um, a large part, if not all, of why it's seen as a bad thing to be non-monogamous is social mores that we've constructed. There's nothing inherently wrong with it.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I think that as far as the sociological side of things that is important is family. Like family is actually very important for raising kids. However, in a non-monogamous situation, there's actually a benefit to family, and that you have more people to participate. So a mom or dad goes off to work, there's another person to come in and help, and it's kind of a team effort. And you find that, like, in a lot of those especially live-in partners, everybody kind of contributes something.
Yeah.
And you have backup, basically.
Yeah, the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, yet when it comes to practicing that, very few do.
Well, and also you can consider situations with your partners. In at least, especially in polyamorous situations, partners really care about each other. So if there's a conflict, there's an argument or something like that, the other partners have an interest in kind of fixing that and helping people resolve those issues, which doesn't really exist in a monogamous situation. It's kind of one versus the other, and that's it. And so it's kind of cool to have that backup to bolster the relationship and try to contribute some new ideas or assist people in overcoming those obstacles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've never actually considered, because as things stand in a monogamous relationship, when there's a problem, you each run off to your own best friend who's known you longer and has a vested interest in your side of things, and it just really becomes more like like a Democrat versus Republican sort of thing, where like nobody's in the middle, nobody's caring about the other side whatsoever. But
yeah,
if all,
and
like, intertwined.
Your friend is probably like, oh, I always hated that guy or that girl. Like, oh, she's a bitch or he's an asshole or something. And
Yep.
so they don't have an interest in really fixing things. But partners that are involved, like, especially because in my experience, I've become really good friends with partners. And so it really troubles me to see there be any kind of conflict. Like, I want to fix it because that's my relationship too.
Right.
So
that actually is a good segue to my question about complexity. Like, I don't know, to me, so I'm basically like monogamous, but in the past I've been in like the swinger life and stuff. So it's like I know I don't have like jealousy issues, but I just don't know that I can wrap my head around the amount of effort it takes for that many relationships. Like, just one relationship is already a lot of time, put into working on things together and spending time together and, reaching that fulfillment. So is there stress with that? Is it hard to manage your time? Do you feel like you have enough time for yourself when you're trying to make time with all these other people and, make sure that the relationship floats? Like, if you go too long without seeing somebody, things start to peter off. And
yeah, okay, so that does become an issue, because though, in my opinion, love is infinite. There's an inexhaustible supply of that.
right, I'm not disputing that.
Time, however, is finite. You have a limited amount of time,
Yep.
and yeah, you got to take time for yourself, and that's really important. So juggling that does become a little bit challenging. It does depend on the partners, because some people are really understanding. It's kind of like your friends. Some of your friends are just demanding of all your time. Like, you got to hang out every day, otherwise I'm never gonna talk to you again. You're not my best friend anymore. And some friends you could talk to once a month, hang out once a month or something like that, and it's all cool. Like, you get together and it's like no time has passed. And those kinds of dynamics exist in a poly relationship as well. So it kind of depends. It depends on the type of person you are and your partners are. some people are more codependent, some people are more independent. Like myself, I'm more independent. I kind of just am who I am, and I don't need anybody else. But I do enjoy connecting with other people. So if I don't talk to somebody for a month or something like that, it's cool. Like, but that can become a problem. But I think it would be a problem. You know, it's easy to look at a non-monogamous situation and find the flaws, but those are flaws that are present in monogamous relationships too.
Sure.
So it just because you kind of add a few more partners doesn't really, those problems exist even in a one-on-one kind of situation too.
Yeah, with the added reduction in problems being that a lot of what people consider to be monogamous relationships, on the down low may not actually be just that.
Good point. Yeah, and in ethical non-monogamy, that's all out on the table. Like, you've got nothing to hide. There's no reason to conceal anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you first,
I should mention another thing too. Like I said, being friends with partners, that is a major factor in kind of overcoming that time problem. Because a lot of times partners will hang out with or a partner's partner will hang out with each other.
Right.
So like I might have a partner, and then they have a partner, and I have a partner, and then those two hang out with each other when we can't hang out. So everybody kind of, there's opportunities that don't exist in a monogamous relationship in that regard. Like you have more people to participate in the relationship, friends and other partners. I mean, it could be like a romantic thing or not. It just depends.
Huh. So how do you even get into something like that? Like I find it hard enough to just date in general, but like to propose a situation like that, like I mean, you must know that they're poly to begin with, right? But like, what if you don't? And so like, say you meet someone and you think they're really awesome and you're poly and they don't know that yet, and you don't know if they're poly. Do you miss a lot of opportunities with potentially great people because they're turned off to your lifestyle, or do you think?
Well, maybe. I mean, the internet has changed a lot of that. People, excuse me, tend to date using online services a lot now. So it's very easy to just throw that out. I mean, my OkCupid profile states that right at the beginning, like, I am polyamorous. Like, here's what you have to expect. So I think that is a useful tool. Like I said, I think the dynamics have changed societally because of technology, and we're nowhere near what we were before. So, and I try to talk to people early on about that. And so it hasn't really been a problem because, well, like you'd mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people in this area that are non-monogamous. So there's no shortage of people. And they're actually, a lot of people seem to really be aware of that and understand it a lot. So it isn't like a completely foreign concept to people. Like, what is that? Most people know in this area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. So the other thing that is something I don't think people who are accustomed to monogamous relationships would really understand is the primary, secondary. Like, is there a tertiary? Like, how far down does it go, and does that create this, I don't know, a feeling of a hierarchy or a class system where someone feels like more or less important than the other?
Yeah. Okay. So there are a lot of people who do that. I personally, I don't believe in that whole hierarchical kind of system. Like, I don't like the idea of referring to somebody as a primary and secondary and stuff, because yeah, it does kind of place people first place, second place, third place, that kind of thing. I kind of feel like people are people, and you have your partners, and
Why should it be that you and I should get along so awfully?
yeah. Oh, Depeche Mode reference, nice one. But I don't like that. I kind of feel like it's just going to be what it is. If somebody wants to refer to somebody as a primary, that's okay. And I mean, it's different when there's a family element, when there's kids and a house and all this history and stuff. Like, I think that's kind of valid. But some people get too caught up in the idea of there being this hierarchy, like, oh, you're number one and you're number two. Well, how does that make any sense? Because the way I see it, and this is something I've explained to a lot of people who are confused or don't really understand polyamory. I use the analogy of kids. If you have one kid, that's your one kid, and that's your favorite kid. But then if you have two, do you like the second kid more than the first? Or do you like the first more than the second? Or do you love them both equally? What if you have a third kid?
Yeah.
I think, and most parents can say, well, I love them equally. They're just different people. And it's the same way with partners. And so I kind of have a problem with that whole like stacking people on top of each other, because I kind of think that's kind of, it creates this artificial the sense of competition, right? Like, and I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. The whole you're number one and you're number two. That does seem a little strange. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Like if there's family and a lot of history and stuff, and you are number 6.
No, I'm not a number. I'm a free man. Oh my God.
That's going deep.
We made a prisoner reference. Holy shit.
Gotta break it up a little bit. It's too much Red Dwarf and Star Trek. You gotta throw in some deep tracks here and there.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So I think one of the things that I think was I guess you haven't asked me any questions, but I'm going to just throw this out there. The thing, because you had talked about jealousy and things like that. That is a very hard thing to overcome, because there's this kind of sense that you possess a person and that kind of thing. But in polyamory, specifically, there is a concept called compersion. And that is the deriving enjoyment from your partner being happy. So you see that your partner's happy, even if it's with another person, and it makes you happy because they're happy. Like, it doesn't matter if it comes from you or whatever. It's just like, and that right there is kind of the fulcrum. It's kind of the thing that you have to overcome. And when you do, all of a sudden, none of that stuff matters. The jealousy thing is almost irrelevant. I mean, it's still present, but it's very easy to overcome at that point, because you can look at your partner and then them being happy, and
Do you experience compersion? Do you feel that?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And I mean, it's something that takes effort. You really have to work at it, because you're kind of deconditioning yourself from.
Is it kind of like the joy you get watching someone open a gift at Christmas that you bought them, like seeing how much they enjoy it or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. It's very much like that. And so you don't think about the money that you spent. You think about the joy that person has. And that becomes a lot more important than the money that you spent, like your loss or whatever.
Right.
So
and I can see that building strength in your relationship between the two of you too, because then I imagine they probably feel a little freed from, the general anxiety that might come with, is this going to be okay? Am I going to be hurting someone?
Yeah, and that is built over time, because early on, as you enter into non-monogamy, there's all these fears and all this stuff. But as soon as you experience that, like as soon as you overcome the jealousy and start to appreciate a partner's partner, especially like when you become friends with them, it's like it, none of that matters anymore. You've just made a new friend, and that other partner doesn't feel like a threat; they feel like an ally. So I, I think that's kind of the key. Actually, there's a quote from somebody I've known, somebody I knew a long time ago, that was kind of a game changer. Uh, Anger is pain turned inside out. Jealousy is fear turned inside out. And when you contemplate that, like it sort of illuminates that whole thing. So like basically jealousy is fear of losing somebody. And if you never had that person to begin with, how can you lose them? And if they return to you, then it's good. If they don't, well, that's the way it works out. So you don't have anything to fear.
So why don't we apply a hypothetical ethical situation?
All right.
I'm curious how the ethical part of ethical non-monogamy works. So let's say you're high school sweethearts, you've been together forever, happily married, and you're totally in love with each other, and you don't have eyes for other people, so you tell each other at least. And then one day, let's say the wife decides, you know what, honey, I want to be polyamorous, and let's say he is still very much like, well, I'm still pretty into you and pretty monogamous feeling. I don't know how comfortable that makes me feel. How best to proceed in this situation, because you still love each other.
Yeah.
So there's technically no real valid reason to part ways, except one person is going to be extraordinarily uncomfortable going forward if you don't.
Yeah, and that's actually addressed in several books on the subject, which I'll throw those in at the end, so everybody can see them, and because I highly recommend reading them, because they actually address those kinds of things.
Huh.
I haven't been involved in that exact scenario, so I can't really provide any advice, but it is addressed in those books, because that is a real thing that does actually happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I'll just say I'll defer to the experts. So the books I recommend, if you're in that situation or contemplating that situation, read those books, and hopefully it will.
But hypothetically though, I was asking you, like, how would you handle it? Like say that was thrust upon you right now. Role play the situation where, maybe you're the guy that doesn't want that to happen, but do you put her happiness first? Do you put your happiness first? Or do you just both go your separate ways and both feel a little miserable from the whole thing?
Well, I mean, today I would put her happiness first, or I would say, hey, cool, all right, that's good. Back in my past, in the past, I'd probably have looked at it differently, but that was when I was fearful of losing somebody, and thought that my identity revolved around my partner. Like, who I am is that person, and stuff. And like none of that stuff matters now. Like people are free to be who they are. And so I don't consider a partner to be somebody who defines me or creates my personality. Like they enhance that personality. So I exist independent of that, I guess. I know I mean, I guess I can like look back into my past and think about it, and it would be very troubling and be very difficult to deal with. But there are ways of approaching that might not make it as difficult.
Yeah. I think it's definitely really complex. It's going to vary person to person, and not just like, so in various relationships, I've been both a quite jealous person and not jealous at all. And it kind of depended on the dynamic between our personalities, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what to put my finger on to point to exactly. Maybe it's a combination of things, but like I mentioned, I've been in a relationship where we did some swinging stuff, but at the same time, like I would get a little jealous if there was like looking to be some kind of like emotional connection, or something that might be going on behind the scenes or something.
That's a good point, actually, because a lot of people hyper focus on the sexual aspect and ignore the relationship aspect. They're like, oh, I would flip out if my partner had sex with somebody. But it's like, well, what does that even matter? What if they fall in love with somebody?
Right.
Isn't that a bigger deal? To me, I see it as a good thing, but some people it would completely ruin the relationship. Sex is just sex. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, there was one point in my life where I had this philosophy that I felt like it would be more cheating if I felt like somebody that I was with fell in love with someone else rather than kissing them or having sex with them, or something that was maybe just heat of the moment passion sort of thing. Like I felt like maybe I could move on from that better than a super strong emotional connection.
Yeah. Well, because the emotional connection is the thing that's actually going to affect a person.
Yeah.
That's a thing that could, like in a like monogamous society, take somebody away from you and push them to another person.
Yeah.
So to me, I guess cheating in that sense would be having an emotional connection with somebody, not having sex, because what does that even matter?
Right. So I talk about this at the end of my book, Beating the Odds Without Any Gods. Get it on Amazon. But
good book, by the way.
Thank you. At the end of my second marriage, after going through all the cancer and stuff and dealing with all the emotions and recovery that go with that, I ended up meeting someone when I went back to school, and I was at a point in my life where I felt like the radiation fried my brain and I wasn't really capable of feeling emotion anymore. And then I met someone that kind of lit that fire again. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I started to like evaluate where I was, in my marriage. And I ended up, that girl ended up kissing me. And then I was like, oh, so, I cheated. I don't know, like people may have different, what are you definitions of what cheating is. It's like I didn't have sex with her or anything. I kissed her, but I'm going to call it cheating because like more often than not, people are going to consider that cheating. But then I went, went to my wife at the time, and I said, I sat down with her and I said, are you happy? And she paused for a moment and she said, I'm happy enough. And I was like, ooh, that's not a great answer.
No.
I felt like I felt a lot of things at that moment. A lot of things went through my head, like, why are we still together? I mean, we do love each other, but that love has morphed. Like there's
Mhm.
different kinds of love, and
It's true.
not to say that a marriage has to be one particular type of love or any combination of types of love, but um, the dynamic had shifted to the point where she wasn't as happy as she should have been. I wasn't
Mhm.
as happy as I should have been. And I didn't even realize I was capable of it anymore because I thought I had been perma-damaged from cancer. And here I had this opportunity, which I ended up pursuing and ended up being kind of a hot mess shitstorm. But
But you gotta try.
right, and no,
And
it's I don't regret anything because it got me to where I am now, and I'm pretty happy where I am now. But
Mhm.
like life is pretty good now. I went through the rough patch with the suicide attempt and all that stuff, but
Mhm.
I came out on the other side better for everything. So I don't regret any of that. I do regret like causing pain to my second wife, but uh, I feel like I tried to handle it as best I could um, in the moment,
Yeah.
with everything that was happening. Yeah, and
Well, you went through some tough shit.
yeah, so
So, I mean, that is not the kind of thing that the average person would go through.
right. So what I'm driving at here in a convoluted sort of way is that I don't think people understand that you can, quote unquote, cheat on someone and still be in love with whoever it is you're stepping out on. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, hang on a second. I gotta take a pee break real quick. I'll
all
cut this out in post.
right. I'll do the same.
Okay. Perfect. It's a lot better. Okay. So I think I remember what you were saying.
Yeah. So I basically just said, um, you can, cheat on someone, but still be in love with whoever it is you're stepping out on.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of people kind of have this either or mentality. Like in order to be with someone or anything like that, you fall out of love with the other person. And in my experience, that's not how it is. I mean, I know that you're still friends with your ex, um,
It took a
and
while.
yeah, yeah. Well, I can imagine.
Yeah.
But and I'm friends with a lot of my exes. Just because things didn't work out in a romantic way doesn't mean we still can't be friends. And I think that's kind of the thing. Like in a monogamous world, people burn bridges. Oh, if you have a falling out or things don't work out, you just got to like burn it all, like nuke it from orbit. Why? Like you love that person at one point in time. Why can't you still love them even as a friend?
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, that's a good point.
So I've seen this philosophy of parenting crop up where um, there's an environment created where a child can, break a piece of expensive china or something, and come to the parent, head hanging low, and say, sorry, mom, I broke the really expensive china. And the parent does not explode in anger. The parent recognizes the remorse that is already present without punishment, and just kind of leaves it at that. Like, okay, yeah, I'm upset, but I'm glad you came and told me. You're not in trouble. You did the right thing by telling me, and it basically builds this relationship where that child now knows it's safe to admit when you've done something that the other person might not like and come and tell you about it. So where this social moray we've built up of cheating being a bad thing has created an underground black market for it.
Yeah, it has. And in the poly world, that kind of thing, like, oh, hey, sorry, I fucked up, and actually having a conversation is a welcome thing, because you have a conversation about it, and it isn't it well, I mean, sometimes it can turn into an argument, but a lot of times the focus is on resolving things, because it should be,
Mm-hmm.
because people do stuff. There's rules and they make mistakes and they break the rules sometimes, and it happens.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to talk about it, come clean, explain things and talk about it, because that is the first step in repairing some kind of damage.
Yeah.
Covering it up and things like that, it's so harmful, and I think that actually leads that leads to the destruction of a lot of relationships. Is
Yeah.
this not only the fear that there's going to be retribution, but the expectation socially that you should exact retribution on somebody for doing something that goes outside the rules.
Right. Yeah. So like that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like this there's not only this fear of like having hurt someone. It's like, that's a given. You feel bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, that's where it takes off and starts snowballing into, well, I feel bad that I've hurt them, but I know if I bring it up, I'm going to be hurt in return, and then we're all going to be a big pile of hurt, and
Yeah.
it's possibly going to like trickle out into other things and end the relationship entirely and
Well,
stuff.
I think it's important in a relationship to have perspective. Like, how harmful is a particular act? If you wander out and have relations with another person, how actually destructive is that? Is it destructive physically, or is it destructive internally? Is it destructive and harmful because of your own expectations of there being some kind of monogamous structure? Like, it's the whole thing. Like, you gotta like look at it. You gotta take it in perspective. Like, how bad is it really? And
Well, I'll say this in defense of monogamy, because I can totally see this aspect. If you don't have that prearrangement of non-monogamy, it absolutely is, I think, valid to feel cheated. It's
yeah,
like if you're two business partners and one just decides, oh, I'm just gonna empty the till into my pocket every night, that's not really something you agreed on beforehand.
that's
But if you
true. And actually, that's a really good point that you bring up. The prearranged agreements.
Mhm.
Um, in a poly situation, like when I meet with somebody, usually there's some kind of conversation. Like, you talk about your partners and things, or your lifestyle, stuff like that. If it becomes serious, usually you sit down and kind of hash out some rules about things, if it's even necessary. Sometimes it's not. Um, But the problem I see with monogamy is that never happens. There's just this kind of unwritten code, apparently, and people assume things are going to be a certain way. And when they don't work out, well, now they feel violated. But what rules have been violated because you've never laid them out? And so that's a negative side of the monogamous situation. Is it's kind of like everybody just assumes, well, this is how it works. And I think there's an opportunity that's lost in that situation that is gained in a non-monogamous situation, because in non-monogamy, people talk all the time. Like, you meet partners and you talk and have conversations, sometimes difficult ones, and it's all good. So, yeah.
All right. Well, is there any I don't know, like a conclusion you want to draw all this into, to get people to understand polyamory? And by the way, like, feel free to ask questions in the comments, and I usually handle the comments, but I will direct them to Erik because I really know the answers here.
Yeah, and I'm totally open to answer any questions and talk to people about things. I mean, I'm not necessarily an expert, but that is my lifestyle. So I know a few
Anecdotally, you
things.
could say things, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So I welcome questions and challenges and things like that, because yeah, it's good. Um, mm, I mean, summarizing it, I guess it, huh? Oh, that's a tough one.
Well, like,
I mean,
what's like the number one myth or something, you know? Like,
well, the number one myth is it's all about sex, and
right,
it's not. It is totally not about sex. Well, sex is a part of it, obviously, because
that's
hell,
part
come
of a
on,
relationship. Yeah.
yeah, it's a relationship. So things get physical sometimes, but the most the biggest derivement of pleasure comes from friendships and going and doing fun things and meeting new people and exploring and challenging yourself too, because overcoming jealousy and things is a big deal. And when you can get to the point where jealousy is not really a thing anymore, well, now you're free. You're no longer ruled by it. And I
Hmm.
think, honestly, like in monogamous relationships, jealousy does rule them. I mean, I've heard of stories of friends who get in relationships with people, and they're like, you can't have these friends, and I don't want you doing that or hanging out with that person and stuff. And it's like, that's bullshit. You people have friends and previous relationships. Like, enjoy that. It's a good thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think yeah, maybe that's a good way to sum it up.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, I don't have a full grasp of it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the three main, like, non-traditional, let's say, styles of relationships are, you have like the swinger stuff where you have a relationship and there's some sex on the side, no emotion, no relationships outside.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got open marriages where you have this relationship, but there's just occasionally some sex on the side, no real emotion or strings attached or relationships or anything. But it's also not necessarily like a shared activity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have this polyamory where there's a relationship and other relationships and sex and emotion, and it's all kind of intertwined and shared amongst one another in so much as anyone wants to share.
Yeah, and I just to uh, I don't know. I guess in that light, like some of my most treasured experiences have been those kind of shared things, like a partner and their partner, us like hanging out on the beach and just chilling or having a Thanksgiving dinner together. Like it's beautiful. When it works really well, it is amazing. And it is a synergistic kind of thing. Like it is absolutely an amplification of emotion and love. And I don't think people should fear it. Like, because again, jealousy is fear turned inside out. Like it's just fear. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, that kind of thing. And if you just let go,
jealous is jealous itself.
yeah. And if you just let go and let things go the way they go, you're going to be a lot happier. Don't worry too much about things. Like, worry about the person. If you really love somebody, you would care about their happiness. And if they really love you, they're not going to leave you. So there's nothing to lose. And if they do leave you, well, whatever. You know, that's the way the ball bounces. That's the way of the universe. So, yeah, I guess that kind of sums it up. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up on that.
Hold on. I've got some books that I was gonna mention.
Oh, right.
So
we'll the description too.
Yeah. So the book that introduced me to non-monogamy many years ago was this one, Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. My white balance got all crazy. So it isn't necessarily poly, but it involves like a Martian who has different ways of dealing with things and stuff like that. But I read that as a kid, and it really kind of planted the seeds. And it's a good book. Heinlein is an excellent author, by the way. So is Philip K. Dick.
That's a great Iron Maiden song too, Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, yeah. And I would recommend that just kind of as a, just a primer to the subject. But what a lot of people I know who are poly, they started by reading this book, The Ethical Slut. And this is actually a really good book, and it's not what you think it is. So I would recommend that as a good start. There's a book called More Than Two, another really good book. My white
also
balance
messes with white balance.
yeah, exactly. I think they all will. This is actually probably, this book here is the best one, especially for people in relationships wanting to kind of explore. The book called Opening Up. So I would recommend that. This is really good and full of a lot of good information. And if you're interested in the biology of things, the scientific side of things, I would recommend a book called Sex at Dawn, because it kind of illustrates the origins of humans and why we're actually not monogamous. So yeah, those are my recommendations.
All right. Well, yeah. I would like to remind everyone to like and share and subscribe to the channel, being the YouTube channel. And we have recently uploaded our backlog and are releasing new episodes on anchor.fm/KSMvidcast. If you're a podcast person and you don't want to have any clue what we're talking about when we say white balance, if that's your choice, that's what makes you happy, then now you have podcasts. So thanks for deep sink diving with us.
Yeah, and happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Whether you have one partner or 2 or 3 or 10, enjoy.
Okay, Simmons.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.